Anyways, but this actually is perfect to move to my second story. Okay, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be able to top that, but this is going to move into my second story. And the second story is that James Gunn, okay, he's a brilliant filmmaker. Everybody knows it. Okay. And basically, he was on a podcast, I would say, a few weeks ago. And he had been talking to actually the character who played Lex Luthor, believe it or not. And he has his own podcast, Michael Rosenbaum. And they were talking about story. And so this piece comes from Variety, talking about James Gunn sounding off on his quote, really lazy superhero movies and bad third acts. There's no rhyme or reason on what's to happen on screen. James Gunn agreed during a recent interview on Inside of You podcast that there are, quote, too many superhero movies, end quote, and television shows. Gunn is the new co-boss of DC Studios alongside Peter Safran, and he assured fans that the company will not, quote, overextend itself with content as it begins to launch a new DC universe that includes Gunn's Superman Legacy and more. We're going to be very careful with the product that we put out, and we're making sure everything is as good as it could possibly be, Gunn said. While the sheer volume of superhero content is a problem, Gunn stressed that the lazy storytelling is a much bigger issue facing the genre at the moment. People have gotten really lazy with superhero stories, Gunn said, and they've gotten to the place where it's another superhero movie. Let's make a movie about it. And then it's, let's make a sequel because the first one did pretty well. And they're not thinking about, why is that story special? What makes the story stand apart from other stories? What is the story at the heart of it all? Why is this character important? What makes this story different than it feels the need to get people in the theaters to go see it? He continued, people have gotten a little lazy, and there's a lot of biff and pow and bam stuff, and it's happening in movies. And I'm watching third acts of superhero films where I just don't feel like there's a rhyme or reason to what's happening. I don't care about the characters, and they've gotten too generic. A solution to the problem is having very different genres within the larger superhero movie genre, as opposed to this sort of middle of the road, his quote, middle of the road of genre and tone that's too many superhero movies have. I like very serious superhero movies, and I like very comedic superhero movies, said Gunn. I like ones that are murder mysteries, but with superheroes. I like to see different types of stories, as opposed to the same old story told over and over again. Gunn and Safran's new DC universe will span film, television, and video games. In addition to Superman Legacy, which Gunn is writing and directing, the new DC film slate will also include Supergirl, World of Tomorrow, and Batman Brave the Bold, the latter of which will be directed by the Flash helmster, Andy Muschietti. Okay, so let's talk about this because it's important. So here's the thing. At the end of the day, okay, and look, people can question him and everything else. James Gunn knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Now, I mean, here are a couple. So I found this. So here are a couple of movies that came out that are good and bad. Okay. So let's touch upon each one of them real quick. Avengers: Infinity War for me is one of the top 5 or top 7 MCU films, hands down, twice on Sunday. Okay. Not only because we got to see Thanos in all of his glory and everything else, but because it was emotional. Okay. You followed all of these characters for over 10 years. And then when you see what happens at the end, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but when you see what happens at the end, you're broken up. People were telling me they were crying when they saw what happened. Crying. And so if anybody actually wants to go back and watch it, okay, I did a whole 5-year retrospective of Avengers: Infinity War. And I watched it with the director's commentary on. And so what they said, what the Russos was talking about, were the fact that this was a tragedy. This was a tragedy that happened, okay? And it took a lot of gumption. So McFeely and I'm trying to think of the other one off the top of my head, but the two writers had been with them, all the way back to Winter Soldier many years earlier, okay? 5 years earlier. That all being said, they ended this on the plot point of point no return. So anybody who's a screenwriter or they know anything about screenwriting knows that there's a plot point called plot of no return. And it's where the villain is, they think the villain's going to win and the hero is going to have a problem. They ended it on that plot point. And that took some serious, serious gumption because you just don't do that. Okay. And there are franchises out there, okay, that do it very, very well. And there are other franchises that do it not so well. And I'm talking about something like a Harry Potter. Harry Potter did it well, okay? Hunger Games did not do it well, okay? Now, that's why, and that's why I made a gazillion dollars and everything else, because it was the culmination of everything, but it worked. The third act of that movie was incredible. It was incredible. Okay, let's move on to Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home was another incredible movie that had legs, okay? For a couple of different reasons, okay? And by the way, that's in the top 5 or top 7 MCU films, okay? In my opinion. By the way, this is all subjective, so, but that being said, number one, okay, this was really the beginning of the nostalgia train. Okay, when we look at the nostalgia of films going back for like the last few years, this is it. This is the film that started the whole thing. Okay, you've gotten plenty of other films since, okay, that have tried to touch upon it, but none have done it as equally as good. So that you had the story, okay? What was brilliant about this is a couple of things. Number one, you had the story. But number two, each film, whether it was Homecoming or Far From Home or No Way Home, encompassed a full year in Peter Parker's life, a school year. And that was a major problem that, you know, the first, and I'm not saying they're bad films, but like the McGuire series and the Garfield series, they didn't do. Peter Parker was supposed to be a high school kid. So when we meet him in Civil War, he's living with his aunt and everything else, right? He's a young kid. He's a high school kid. There's something to be said about that. Okay, so No Way Home. Number one had the story. Okay. Number two, it was emotional. Number three, okay, yes, they did the nostalgia just right. They touched upon each thing just right, and they made Toby and they made Andrew a part of the um, movie, a big part of the movie, but it was the second half of it. They didn't just throw them in because it's a long movie, so it's a little over 2 hours. So there's something to be said there. Okay, incredible movie. That's why nobody. I'm going to say this right now. Anybody who thought that was going to make $260 million opening weekend, they're a liar. They're a liar. They're a liar. Because even when tracking was coming out for this, okay, it was 80, 90, 100. And this is pre-pandemic. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, okay. And then it started to get bumped up to like 120, 140. And like, okay, there's going to be a big movie. Nobody, but nobody thought that it was going to make $255 million over the weekend. So, just a little side note, okay? So, as it stands right now, okay, it made $260 million opening weekend. Think about that. $260 million. Yeah. So it's one of those things where, so it actually, this tells you something. Okay. It grossed $800 million here in the States. Okay. So look at it like this. Okay. It made $1.9 billion. Think about it like this. Black Panther opened to, well, didn't, oh, it, so that's one of 8 films. This is those 2 films there, Avengers Infinity War and Spider-Man No Way Home, are 2 of only 8 films ever to open to $200 million plus. A lot of them are Marvel films. Okay. Endgame, um, Infinity War, right there. Okay. The Avengers, that was the first film back in 2012. No Way Home, Jurassic World, okay. Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker. 6 of those 8 movies are Marvel films or Disney films. But nobody had a point that this was going to make $260 million opening weekend. Put in perspective, Endgame made 324. That tells you something. Okay, so I kind of went off on a tangent there about there. But nonetheless, let's move to the last film. Okay, and that's Batman versus Superman. Now, Batman versus Superman was one of those films, and everybody can watch the YouTube videos about when it was, the trailer dropping and everything else. Getting back to the third act, that third act was terrible. I mean, I've watched it, and I've watched the extended edition. That movie was terrible. Excuse me. That movie was terrible. And of all of the time they were together, the fighting, and that's everybody. I mean, look at it. Batman versus Superman. 8 minutes. I didn't stutter. 8 minutes they were on screen together, fighting as Batman and Superman. That's it. Once the fight was done, that was it. So there was a big buildup, and then that's it. The person that stole the show from me in that movie was Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. So when he talks about bad third acts, you have 2 examples that are very good. And once again, film's subjective. You have 2 that are, in my opinion, are very good, and the other one is not. Okay. Now let's talk about a couple films that came out in 2021. You had mentioned Suicide Squad, right? Suicide Squad, I loved Suicide Squad. I loved it. Okay, not just because it was James Gunn and everything else, because A, he had done that kind of thing with Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay. But B, he was very detailed in the story, whether it was Polka Dot Man, whether it was Peacemaker, whether it was Idris Elba's character. We got more Harley Quinn in that. So that was a big thing. Wonder Woman 1984. Wonder Woman made $1 billion. Everybody was looking forward to that. And it fell flat. It really, really fell flat. Okay. With Kristen Wiig and Cheetah, and it just didn't work. Bring back Chris Pine, the whole 9 yards. Okay. Once again, we talked about No Way Home, just crushing it. Shang-Chi, very, very, very good film. Why? For a couple of reasons. Number 1, it was the introduction to a new character. Number 2, it was a different character. Okay? This is somebody that was not your generic white male or white female character. This wasn't, a Harley Quinn or a Joker or whatever. So that was, the diversity was there too. Okay. Number 3, it went in depth about the character. Okay. We saw his homeland. We saw why his father was doing what he was doing. We saw all of these things. Really good. And then next to him, okay, you have Eternals. I didn't care for Eternals at all. Okay. As a matter of fact, I was really dismayed by it. Why? Because There was too much CGI. There was way too much CGI. And it turned me off. If I'm going to go see a movie, I don't want to be 85, 90% of it being CGI. Okay. And once again, it kind of goes back to the Flash. I mean, that's one of the biggest mistakes that they had was their crap CGI. So Gunn. So last thing I'll say is this: James Gunn. James Gunn knows how to write stories. Okay, because as he said, he knows what he's doing with the story and everything else. Okay, whether it's the Suicide Squad there on the right, okay, or whether it's Guardians of the Galaxy there on the left. Okay, he knows what he's doing. And this is why I think that everybody, even if you're not the biggest DC fan, they need to give him a chance. Because he clearly knows what he's doing. And what I'll say is this: it's quality over quantity. One big thing that Marvel has got a problem with, okay, is the fact that they just keep pushing things out left and right. I have always said this. I would rather 5 excellent feature films and things on Disney Plus than 10 mediocre ones. Because once you start oversaturating people, they start to take mediocrity as a given. And we don't deserve that. Okay? We don't deserve that. And the other thing, too, is one of the biggest things is they're interconnecting Disney Plus and what they're doing with Disney Plus. And I understand they need content, but that's all icing on the cake. They didn't make their money by Disney Plus. They made it by the $1 billion Infinity War. They made it by the almost $3 billion Endgame. They made it by Civil War. They made it by the $200 million opening of Avengers. That's how they made their money. So, Guardians of the Galaxy. We're coming up on the 10th anniversary of Guardians of the Galaxy next year, guys. Okay? They went from being C-list, superheroes to A-listers. Why? Because of the story. And that's what he's getting at. Anyways, what do you guys think about James Gunn in his comments? Do you think he's right? Do you think there are too many superhero movies? Do you think there needs to be a subsection of superhero movies? Or would you rather just keep it the way it is? Leave me your thoughts down in the comments, and I'm going to get back to everybody.